Hey everyone, welcome to another video by Singularity Computers. Today I'm taking a look at the new EK Supremacy CPU water block. EK has recently made some big changes to their products. They've released a bunch of new water blocks, reservoirs, pump tops, etc. They've also completely changed the aesthetics of their products. Now the EK Supremacy is EK's new flagship CPU water block, and it's the direct successor to the EK Supreme HF. According to EK, they have achieved a 20% increase in flow and a 2-degree decrease in temperatures. So as well as giving the EK Supremacy a new look, they have also optimized the design and increased the performance. So EK has also recently changed their packaging. As well as changing the colors, they have also followed through with the new aesthetics from their water blocks. They call it the CSQ or Circle Square design. Okay, included in the package is the installation guide, which is concise and easy to follow with diagrams. Also, all of the necessary mounting hardware for the following sockets. All of the AMD AM2 sockets, also sockets 754, 939 and 940, and the following Intel sockets: LGA 1155, 1366 and 2011. Okay, now this is important. Also included is 2 jet plates, and these jet plates are optimized for different CPU sockets. The jet plate that's installed by default is a universal jet plate, and it is 0.8 of a millimeter thick. This jet plate is optimized for socket 1155 CPUs, and it is 1 millimeter thick. Otherwise, besides the thickness, it looks exactly the same as the jet plate that is installed by default. Okay, now this jet plate is optimized for socket 2011, and it's actually 0.7 of a millimeter thick. As you can see, it allows for higher flow. Now I'm going to show you how to swap the jet plates shortly, and also how to install the AMD top plate in case you want to use the water block on an AMD socket. Okay, also included is some thermal paste. Now this is something else that EK has updated recently. They have changed from Arctic MX4 to G-Lit Extreme. Also included in the package is of course the EK Supremacy. Okay, it's now time for a look at the EK Supremacy itself. Now I'm going to start by talking about the aesthetics, the new CSQ Circle Square design, because from what I've seen and heard of people's opinions, it is quite controversial. The new design is not for everybody. Now, when it comes to my own opinion, when I first saw the new design in the photos, I must say I was quite shocked. Because like a lot of other people, I like things the way they were. I really didn't think there was anything wrong with the aesthetics of EK's water blocks. I must say though, seeing the water block in real life, it does look a lot better than it did in the photos when I first saw it. And when I first saw it, I did think that it might grow on me. Now really, what this new design is about is marketing. I mean, EK has gone for the same simplistic design on all of their product lines. It really makes them stick out. From now on, when you look at a product with this design on it, you're going to know straight away that it's an EK product. It doesn't matter what the component is. It's kind of difficult to see a logo down in the corner sometimes. So basically what this design is one massive logo for EK. And I guess it also makes people want to use EK's components right through their build to match up the aesthetics. Having the same circle square design on all of the components means that you can easily match them. Now I actually really like the new frosting on the top of the water block. I think it's going to look great in combination with lighting. Mainly having the frosting over the top and then it's transparent around the outsides. Because when you have a transparent top combined with lighting, it gives the lighting a real hard look. It reflects off everything, all of the different facets inside. But with a frosted top, the lighting is going to glow. It's going to give the lighting a soft glow, and I think it's going to look excellent. So now just looking around the water block, we have the inlet on the left hand side and the outlet on the right hand side, and this is actually really important because of the way the water block is designed, and I'm going to give you a look at that shortly when I pull the water block apart to show you how to change the jet plates. I really like the EK logo stamped into the piece of metal and pushed into one of the circles in the top of the water block. I think that looks great. The only thing that really clashes about the circles is how the inlet is kind of between two circles, whereas the outlet is inside one of the circles. So you can see that all of the sides of the water block are transparent. Supremacy is written on the side just there. Now another big reason that they frosted the top of the water block is because the internals are a little bit ugly, which I think you can see by looking through the sides of the water block. There's two 3mm LED holes drilled into the side. Now by default the Intel top plate is installed. Okay, now looking underneath the water block, you can see that there is a cover in place, and it's important that you leave this cover in position until right before you are about to install the water block. The reason for this is that the surface on the bottom of the water block is polished to a mirror finish. The smoother the finish is on this surface, the better the performance is going to be to a certain extent. As you can see, there are just no visible imperfections on the base of the water block. It is a perfect mirror finish, and you can really see how high quality this water block is. Now, the base of the water block is often referred to as the cold plate, and obviously it needs to be the most heat conductive part of the water block because it makes contact directly with the CPU, and it needs to take the heat away from the CPU and transfer it into the coolant, and then the coolant goes to the radiators and the heat is transferred back out of the coolant into the air. So to achieve the highest possible performance, EK uses the purest copper available. So that is what the cold plate is made from. It is then nickel plated on this particular version of the water block. There's actually 6 versions of this water block. This is the nickel plexi, so it has a nickel plated copper base and a clear plexi top. There's then also the nickel acetal, so again a nickel plated base and then an acetal top which is black. And then there's the copper version of the same 2 water blocks again, so the copper plexi and the copper acetal. And then there's the full copper and the full nickel. So basically there's a full copper water block and a full nickel plated copper water block. Now people often ask me, is there a performance difference between these different water blocks? The answer is, if there is a difference, it's a negligible one. Okay, it's now time for my guide on how to swap the jet plates and also on how to swap the top plate if you are using this water block for an AMD CPU. Now you need to be extremely careful when doing this. You should do this on a soft surface. I'm actually using rubber underneath the water block, otherwise you are going to scratch the top of the water block. You also need to be careful that you don't scratch the bottom of the water block with the Allen key that you were using. Now it would have been good to have seen an Allen key included with the water block. EK usually includes Allen keys and tools with their water blocks, but not this time, but that's okay. So I'm now undoing the 4 bolts from the bottom of the water block. Now these are M4 countersunk black Allen key bolts. On the plexi and acetal versions of the EK Supreme HF, the bolts actually came down from the top, so you could see the bolt heads from the top of the water block. So having the bolt heads at the bottom of the water block is definitely an improvement to the aesthetics. Okay, as you can see, I've now removed the cold plate, and you can see that inside of the water block on the top of the cold plate is a dense fin array. Now this is an extremely important part of the water block because this is where all of the heat transfer takes place from the CPU or the heat generating component directly into the coolant. So the thinner those fins are and the more fins there are, the better the performance is going to be to a certain extent. And that also goes for the material that the cold plate is made out of. The more conductive that is, the better the performance is going to be, and also the thinner it is, the better the performance is going to be to a certain extent. So as you can see, the entire cold plate is nickel plated. Now, I often get a lot of people commenting on my builds when I use a smaller piece of tubing in a water cooling system. So example, I go from 1/2 inch tubing down to 1/4 of an inch tubing. People think that it's going to, severely restrict the flow of the water cooling system. But obviously those people aren't really thinking or don't know about the design of water blocks, because flow restriction is actually an important part of increasing the performance of a water block. Because as I said, the more dense the fin array is to a certain extent, the thinner those fins are, the better the performance is going to be. But the problem is, the more fins there are, the smaller the gaps between the fins, the more flow restriction there's going to be. So it's finding a balance between too much flow restriction and lots of fins. Now, also on this subject is jet plates, because what a jet plate is actually for is basically decreasing the flow. Well, it's actually pushing all of the flow of the water cooling loop into a very small, dense area. Now, think about why this is. I mean, I could talk about this in a more complicated way and say, it's to excite the water molecules to increase the thermal conductivity. But I'm just going to give you an analogy and an example here. Think about if you have a red hot steel rod and you put it in a river, and the river is big, wide, 100 meters across, flowing really slowly. You put the steel rod in one side of the river. Okay, think about how quickly that steel rod is going to cool down. Then think about this. The entire flow of the river is pushed from being 100 meters wide down to being 5 meters wide. What's it going to do? It's going to increase in velocity. There's going to be a lot more turbulence. There's probably going to be white water, but it's going to go a lot faster. And you put that steel rod in the river again. If the water's moving faster past it, it's going to cool it down a lot quicker. So that is basically what a jet plate is for. Okay, so as you can see, underneath the cold plate is an O-ring, and you've obviously got to be careful not to damage this O-ring. It sits in a little groove around the outside of the plexi part of the water block. It also sits up against the top plate. So what I'm doing here now is swapping the top plate over to the AMD version. So that's all there is to it. It's very simple. You will have to remove the O-ring and replace it again, as you can see me doing now. Okay, so I have reinstalled the Intel top plate because that's the one I'm going to be using, and I'm now removing the universal jet plate that's installed by default. So you can see how much flow restriction that creates in the water block. The coolant actually comes down from, well, it's actually upside down at the moment. It comes down from the top, and the jet plate forces the coolant into a very small area and then straight onto the fins. So it goes straight down onto that cold plate. The pressure, the velocity is increased, and just like that example I gave you before, it is it increases the thermal conductivity. So you can see the different thicknesses of the jet plates. The two that look exactly the same, the universal one and the SOC 1155 optimized jet plates, they almost look exactly the same. The thickness is the difference between the two. So I guess what the different thicknesses, the different thickness does is allows a little bit more of a gap over the top of the fins. So you can see there's another inner O-ring inside the water block, and this seals the jet plate to the top plexi part of the water block. So just a close look at the design of the inside of the water block. You can see the difference between where the inlet is and the outlet is. You can see the inlet is extremely important because it comes down from above the jet plate. The coolant then, as I said, goes through the jet plate, through the fins, and then basically just spreads all around the outside of the water block and goes back out through the outlet. So as you can see, I'm now pushing the jet plate O-ring back into position. Now this is actually a lot easier to put into position than the larger outer O-ring is, but it's difficult to keep it in position because once you've reinstalled the jet plate can easily move. I find definitely the best way to do it is to have the water block upside down and level, just like I have it. There's actually 4 lugs around the outside of the jet plate, and they just hold the jet plate into position and stop it from sliding around. So once you've pushed it down onto those lugs, you can then put the cold plate back in position on top of it. It's obviously critical that all of the components are properly in position and lined up before you reinstall the cold plate. And it's also extremely important that you get the orientation of all of the components correct. So the fins on the cold plate actually need to go across the jet plate. So as you can see, I have the jet plate running vertically top to bottom, and I have the fins on the cold plate going across from one side to the other. So that orientation is absolutely critical, because if you don't get it right, the water block is not going to work properly. It's not going to perform very well. So it's now just a matter of tightening the bolts again, and you need to do this evenly. This is also important. You can't tighten one bolt at a time. Okay, there's my little guide on how to swap the jet plates and also the top plate. So as you can see, I swapped it to the Socket 2011 optimized version. Okay, just a quick look at the EK Supremacy in a system. So this is my personal primary system, Singularity Beast 2. Click on the link on the screen if you want to check out the build log for this system. Now for my temperature results. I didn't actually test flow because overall flow is really only going to affect the temperatures anyway, and the temperatures are of course what matters the most overall. Something to consider though is that an increase in flow in the CPU water block is going to improve the results for the rest of your water cooling system. Now I actually use this system for the testing, Singularity Beast 2. If you want the full specifications of this system, you'll need to click on the link on the screen and check out the build log. The CPU though is an Intel Core i7-3930K at 4.6 GHz, 1.4 volts. Now I tested the EK Supreme HF and the EK Supremacy so that you can compare the two. Now the results that I got for both of the water blocks were almost exactly the same. The ambient temperature for all of this testing was 30 degrees Celsius. Now the ambient temperature is absolutely critical when doing temperature testing because it directly affects the temperatures of your components. If someone gives you temperature results and they don't give you the ambient temperature, then the results don't mean anything because they're only giving you half of the story. Okay, I did 2 tests per water block, an idle test and a load test. For the idle test, I cold boot the system and let it idle for 1 hour. For the load test, I run Prime 95 small FFTs for 1 hour. All of these temperature results are averages of the CPU cores. Okay, for the EK Supreme HF, for the idle test, the result was 38 degrees Celsius. For the EK Supremacy for the idle test, the result was 39 degrees Celsius. So this is only 9 degrees above ambient. It's a good result, but it is 1 degree hotter than the EK Supreme HF. This could be within margin of error though. Okay, for the load tests, for the EK Supreme HF, 61 degrees Celsius. For the EK Supremacy, I also got 61 degrees Celsius. Okay, it's now time for me to conclude this review. Now the EK Supreme HF was an incredible water block, and the fact that EK has managed to improve on that is just exceptional. Obviously my temperature results don't really show an improvement in the EK Supremacy, but there is a reason for this. My water cooling system You know, differently configured water cooling systems are obviously going to get different results, and my water cooling system has a massive radiator capacity, extremely powerful pump configuration, and because of this, the differences in performance between the two water blocks didn't really show up. The other thing to consider is that I didn't test flow, and an increase in flow might not improve the temperatures of this water block, but it will improve the performance potentially of the rest of your water cooling system. The aesthetics, as I said, I think it's something that will continue to grow on me. Definitely at first, like a lot of other people, I was shocked and even a little bit disappointed, but it didn't take long for the aesthetics to start growing on me. And now that I've seen the water blocks in a few different builds, with different coolant colors and lighting, the aesthetics really just blend in. The other thing to consider is that there's other versions of this water block, and I think that some of the other versions look a lot better than this particular version. The full copper and the full nickel versions of this water block just look exceptional. So overall, I'm really impressed with this water block. It certainly gets a thumbs up from me. That sums up this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like and favorite if you want to see more.